Hi friends, are you ready for the final chapters of Chasing Helicity? I hope you've enjoyed this book. Remember that if you did like this book and you're interested to find out what happens next, because it does leave you on a cliffhanger, this is a 3-trilogy book series. So she just actually came out with her 3rd book that goes along with this. I have not read those, so I can't tell you if they are good or if there's maybe some content that parents may want to pre-read first. All right, so here we go. When we left off, Helicity and Sam went storm chasing and they went over a bridge, and the nose of the SUV is in a raging river because a flash flood is happening. So, are you ready? Final chapters. Here we go. Sam, we've got to get out of here, Helicity screamed. Miraculously, the engine was still running. She hit the window button as it rolled down. She unbuckled and started to climb out. Then she realized Sam hadn't moved. Oh my gosh, Sam! He was slumped over the airbag. There was blood and broken glass in his hair. She swung back in, undid his seatbelt, and quickly and gently as she could, pushed him back against the seat. For one heart-stopping moment, she thought he was dead. Then he blinked and stared at her, dazed. What's happening? A splash of water caught him in the face. It seemed to clear his focus. His face turned into a ruckus of horror. Oh my gosh! Come on! Helicity lunged over him and slammed her palm on the window control. The pane of glass slowly slid down into the door. She twisted the key and turned off the engine. Use the roof rack bars to climb up, now! Sam did as she ordered, slithering through the opening. His legs were disappearing and she moved back to her window. She reached up and out, feeling for the roof rack rails. She touched them. Her wet fingers slipped and then found purchase. Twerking her body awkwardly through the opening and using her legs to push, she hauled herself out and then pulled up next to Sam. Panting, they stared at each other. Blood trickled down Sam's face from a deep gash in his forehead. His eyes were full of despair. 14, he choked. Hey, you kids! A deep baritone shouted as penetrating as a foghorn bellowed out to them. They turned their heads, moving cautiously so that not to shift the SUV from his tenuous position. Tornado Tom stood at the edge of the water. He'd parked his truck so his truck was facing them. He held 2 bright orange life vests. Another man was feverishly unwinding cable from a winch attached to the truck's grill. Tom clipped his life vest to the cable with a heavy-duty carabiner. He cupped his hand around his mouth. Get ready to catch! It took 3 throws before the vest reached them. Helicity unclipped them, shoved one over her head, and the other over Sam's. Then she started to attach the line to the roof rack. No! Tom yelled. Around yourself! He mimed, looping the cable under his arms and then fastening the clip. We'll pull you in one at a time. Okay, Helicity yelled back. She inched toward Sam. He drew back. You first. No, you're hurt. You need help more than me. She didn't wait for him to argue, encircling him with the cable and securing the clip. He grabbed her hand. If you don't make it, I will. I'm a survivor. She squeezed his hand and shouted, Go! to Tom. The winch started turning. The line tightened. Sam was pulled away from her. At the last second, he released her hand and it fell into the water. His head disappeared for a second, and then he bobbed back up and the winch started dragging him through the current. When he neared the water's edge, Tom splashed in and dragged him out. His partner immediately unclipped the line and threw it to Helicity. It soared overhead. She reached up to snatch it from the air, but missed. It snagged on the bar on the far side of the SUV. She slowly crawled over, trying not to imagine the vehicle shifting underneath her, and tugged to free the line. Helicity! A scream cut through the driving rain and howled like wind, like a knife. Helicity looked over her shoulder to see Lana and Ray leaping out of Ray's truck. Helicity gave a sob of relief. I'm okay, she cried. Hurry, Lana shrieked. Oh my gosh, Helicity, hurry! That's when Helicity detected a faint sound in the distance, a dull rumble, like faraway thunder. But she knew in an instant that it wasn't thunder. It had been raining hard in northern Iowa for days. Swollen streams and rivers were threatening to crest their banks and overtop hastily constructed sandbag walls and breached levees. But the colossal wall of water could still break through the barricades. If it did, it would churn and pound downstream with incredible speed, and it would sound like thunder. A flash flood. She was right. One of the most powerful and destructive forces of nature was hurling toward her. If she was caught in it, no life vest would save her. She'd be swept away, her body hurled against hidden rocks, battered down by trees and branches and other debris. That pummeling might not kill her, but it could knock her out. She'd pull beneath the white water, and then she would drown. I'd have to get to high ground now. With one fierce yank, she freed the cable. Pull! She yelled as she looped it around herself and fastened the clip. The winch tugged her into the water. She came up gasping, the cold water stealing the breath from her lungs. Ray, Tom, his partner, and Lana hauled the line, pulling her faster than the winch. Helicity kicked, but the swift-moving water fought against her, sapping her strength. To each movement became weaker and weaker. Suddenly, Lana froze and turned upstream. No! She dropped the line, ran into the water, and grabbed Helicity's vest and began hauling her backwards. Come on, darling, you can do this. Help me do this, Lana begged. Helicity clenched Lana's shirt, dug her feet into the slick mud beneath her, and with her last bit of strength, pushed. At the same instant, the men gave a sharp pull. Helicity surged forward unexpectedly and knocked Lana off her feet. Helicity tightened her grasp on Lana's shirt. The current rolled them so that she ended up staring into Lana's eyes. Time stood still. Then Lana's lips moved. Helicity tried to make out the words, but she couldn't hear anything but the pounding water. The men yanked again. Helicity lost her grip on Lana's shirt and shot backward, sliding effortlessly over the slippery muck. One more yank and Tom's partner was dragging her to higher ground. She fought him, sobbing and struggling to see past them into the water. Lana! Lana! Lana scrambled upright and thrashed toward her. She was fast, but the thundering wall of water was faster. Last chapter. A force of nature, a force of death. Helicity stared at the video title on Tornado's Tom's website. Her fingertip grazed the touchpad and shifted the cursor to push play. She hesitated, then tapped the arrow. The screen changed to an image of a sky thick with dark billowing clouds. If you think flash floods can't hurt you, Tornado Tom's solemn voice over-intoned, think again. A lightning bolt cut a brilliant zigzag through the gray. A monstrous clap of thunder made her speakers tremble. Tom appeared on the screen, a grave expression on his craggy face. The following video, taken just days ago from my dash cam, shows graphic images of the destructive power of flash floods. His voice dropped to an even more somber tone. It also shows just how life-threatening that power can be. The video shifted to the rain-soaked windshield of Tornado Tom's storm-chasing truck. The image blurred briefly, then refocused through the glass. Helicity's breath caught in her throat. There was Lana's SUV, dangling nose first from the narrow bridge, its grill buried in the surging river below. Sam clung to the rooftop. Rainwater mingled with the blood dripping from his head wound. Seconds later, she watched herself struggle out of the far side of the SUV. She hit fast forward, moving quickly past Sam's rescue. Her fumbling attempts to free the tow rope, and her fall into the cold rushing water. She pressed play when Lana loomed into view. No! Lana's scream of horror was muffled by the driving rain, rushing water, and the windshield, but it still cut through Helicity like a knife. Her vision swam as Lana plunged into the churning waves to save her. Hey, enough of that! She started. Andy stood in her bedroom doorway. Frowning, he moved to her bedside and shut her laptop. Enough of that, he repeated more gently this time, but with a finality that brooked no argument. Helicity slumped back against the wall of pillows and winced in pain. As soft as the pillows were, she still felt the bruises that bloomed in ugly shades of purple, blue, and black across her torso and arms. Whether the injuries were from the SUV crash or the violent pulls on the tow rope, she didn't know. Didn't care. She almost died because of me. Andy sank onto the bed next to her. The key word there is almost. Helicity looked at her brother with tortured eyes. When I was in the hospital, I heard the nurses talking. They thought I was asleep, but I heard them. They said... Her voice caught. She swallowed hard. They said rescuers found her body a mile downstream. She was battered, broken, barely alive. But she is alive, Hel, and that's what you have to focus on. She's in a coma, Andy. What if she never comes out of it? Andy was quiet for a long moment. Then he glanced over his shoulder and in a low voice said, "Would it help if you saw her?" Helicity sat up. "What? How?" "They moved her here, to our hospital, a few days ago." Fury rocked her. "And no one told me?" Andy held up his hand. "Hey, you weren't in such good shape a few days ago. Plus, I didn't know if you were allowed to visit her because you're not family." "She doesn't have family," Helicity growled. Andy went on as if he hadn't spoken. "Even if they have a policy, I have connections at the hospital. People who looked out for me when I was there. I've stayed in touch with a few of them." He glanced over his shoulder again. "I can get you in." "Let's go." Helicity shoved her laptop aside and climbed off the bed. As she did, Lana's necklace swung free from her shirt. The lightning bolt charm winked in the sunlight. The necklace had come off in her hand when she lost grip of Lana's shirt. She clutched it all the way to the hospital, refusing to part with it, lashing like a wild animal whenever anyone tried to take it from her. Anyone except Ray. The big bear of a man with his deep, warm laugh, never-ending stories, and had aged 20 years overnight. He turned as silent as the grave. He came to see her one afternoon as she left the hospital. She gave him the necklace then, but insisted of pocketing it. Instead of pocketing it, he kissed it. He kissed her on the forehead and placed it around her neck. "Hang on to it for her," he murmured. "Give it back to her when she comes to, okay?" She hadn't taken it off since. She tucked the lightning bolt back inside her shirt and loosened her braid and reached for her comb. It lay on her dresser next to an orange bottle of pain pills. Her doctor had prescribed them, just in case. She had taken the first one the first night, but the drug had given her such disturbing dreams that she'd left the rest of the pills untouched. The over-the-counter medication wasn't as strong, but she preferred the minor pain to the prescription pill side effects. Andy's reflection joined hers in the mirror. His gaze flicked to the dresser top. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It vanished when she saw him watching him. He murmured that he'd meet her in the car and left. Helicity bit her lip. Andy had been acting odd lately. Outwardly, he appeared to be mending. His bruises had faded and his cuts had healed, and while his arm was still bound, he didn't seem to be holding it as gingerly. But something wasn't right. He was secretive and reclusive. To Helicity, it was as if something inside him was broken. What she didn't know. She also detected an undercurrent of uneasiness in her household. Her parents seemed to be walking on eggshells around each other, and even more strangely, around Andy. She shook her head. Whatever was going on, she wasn't going to have to live with it for much longer. In 2 weeks, she'd be on a plane to Texas. Mia had reached out to her for the first moment she could, inviting her to come to stay with her at the bed and breakfast. To Helicity's surprise, her parents readily agreed for her to go. "It'd be good for you to be away from reminders," her mother had said. How much time she'd spent in Texas was up to her. She had a one-way ticket so that she could return whenever she chose. She and Andy entered the hospital 10 minutes later. Members of the staff greeted them with polite nods. A few did double takes when she passed, no doubt recognizing her from the news coverage of the accident. She guessed that they were thinking, how horrific it was that a woman had nearly died because of her. How guilty she must feel walking around while her rescuer lay unconscious. How tragic it would be if a savior died without ever waking. She guessed because it was what she herself was thinking. She tightened her lips, wrapped her hand around the lightning bolt, and followed Andy to the corridor. Hospital smells assaulted her nose. Ammonia, institutional food, vomit. She didn't register the path they took, but suddenly she was standing in front of a window outside Lana's room. "Come on," Andy ushered her inside. "If you're lucky, you'll have a few minutes before they start asking questions or kick you out." He pulled out his phone. "Text me when you're through." "Where will you be?" "With a friend. I'll find you." He left his thumbs moving over his phone as he typed. The door closed behind them with a gentle shushing sound. Helicity stood rooted in the spot for a long moment. Now that she was there, she couldn't look at Lana. Not yet. Instead, she read the cards from the well-wishers, her parents, Pete, Tornado Tom, and a few other storm chasers. And Ray, of course. But one person's name was missing. Helicity hadn't seen Sam since the tragedy. She knew he'd checked into the hospital with her, but he and his baby blue sedan had disappeared soon after he was released. Every now and then, Helicity thought about texting him, but she never did. She simply had nothing to say to him. And she was worried about what he would have to say to her, that they had made a bad decision together, and the result lay in the bed next behind her. She read the last card and then took a deep breath and slowly turned to face Lana. The storm chaser was lying in bed. Wires ran from blinking, beeping machines to sensors on her arms and head. A tube snaked between her lips, which looked cracked and painfully dry. That tube was breathing for her, Helicity realized. Lana's eyes were closed. "Oh, Lana," she swallowed back tears. Helicity drew up a chair. She wanted to take Lana's hand, but didn't dare. Lana looked fragile and swollen, no longer the bold and brave hero Helicity had grown to adore. Instead, she rested her hand on the covers so that her pinkies touched Lana's. "Please wake up," she whispered. "Please." Lana's eyes stayed closed, the only sound outside Helicity's muffled tears, the constant beep from Lana's heart rate monitor. Helicity was silent on the ride home. Instead, she changed into her riding outfit of jeans, long-sleeved shirt, and boots. She wheeled an old bike she'd found in the rental house garage and pedaled from the farm to where Raven was stabled. The bicycle was too small, and her growing legs crunched to her chest as she fought through the tears again. The bike, like so much of the rest of her life since the accident, just didn't fit. The sun was lowering in the sky, turning the wispy cirrus clouds on the horizon into flames of red, orange, and yellow. And as she rode her horse up the hill, she climbed onto the boulder, sat down, and drew her knees to her chest, and tilted her head back to stare at the sky. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes and trailed down her jawline as she thought about Lana lying in the hospital bed. But after a minute, she stood and dashed the tears away. They didn't seem right, not when it came to Lana. Because she's a survivor, she thought, not a victim. She stood up and tugged the necklace from beneath her shirt. She held the lightning bolt out with both hands like an offering to the setting sun. She thought, "I'm going to get through this, too." All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed this book by Ginger Z, Chasing Helicity.